Hello and welcome back to another random video Thursday, although it's not really all that random considering I've done plenty of time-lapse videos in the past on my channel here. This video here just doesn't contain any experiments or plant-related knowledge for that matter. Although I guess what I do time-lapse is plants, so there's that. But this video here is going to be about a quick overview, overlook, or mainly my opinion on the new Atli EON time-lapse cameras, and I will be comparing that to the Brinno brand of time-lapse cameras, which is the ones I've used pretty much the entire time on this channel. This here is the Brinno TLC 200 Pro, the original model, and this here is the Brinno TLC 2000, and mainly this is just an upgraded version of the TLC 200 Pro, and that's going from 720p to 1080p. I'll be talking more about that in a little bit. I want to head over to the unboxing I did of the Atli EON time-lapse camera. I'm not really fond of unboxing videos, but I figured I would at least show what comes in the package here. It comes with a pretty nice mini tripod, a nice ball head mini tripod, which I have used, and I'm pretty surprised it doesn't feel cheap. I'll put it that way. Also, you get the USB-C charging cord, which is also used to power the camera, whether you're using the battery or not. Obviously, you get an instruction manual, which is very easy to follow. Comes with the battery, and then it also comes with a rubber housing that you basically just slip the camera into. It fits very nicely. It's very well made. Also comes with the lens hood, and it's expandable, so you can. It's for storage. It collapses down, which is pretty nice. But it's made out of the same rubber that the cover for the camera is. And when you put them together, they mend up really, really nicely. And when you push that lens hood over top of the rubberized housing portion, it makes a pretty nice seal. And that kind of brings me to the next thing, which is the camera itself. I wouldn't call it waterproof. I wouldn't call it rainproof. I would call it weather resistant at best. I would never trust this particular housing to be left out in the rain. But if you put it over or under an overhang or something like that, where it's pretty much kind of like out of the rain, or at least direct rain, it should be perfectly fine. So now I want to go ahead and compare the new Atli EON time-lapse camera to the ones that I've used in the past, which is the Brinno. And this might be a little bit long-winded here, so if you're just interested in seeing how the Atli EON time-lapse camera works, I did get a chance to play with it a little bit here. I got a chance to use the app, and I recorded some seed sprouting. And I found that to be actually pretty nice. I really enjoyed my initial use of this camera, and I think it did a very good job and had very high quality video, or at least the pictures, which was turned into a video. I really don't have any complaints about it, except for a couple things which I will now talk about. So this is the long-winded portion of this video. I'm sorry, this is unscripted, but I want to go ahead and just do some comparisons here. And there's a couple major things actually. One of the major things is that the Atli EON time-lapse camera does not have a screen on the camera itself. There's nothing on the back here at all. It's kind of a positive, because when you design a camera like this, there's less tech that has to go into it, which means it can be made cheaper. And really, it kind of helps save on battery life as well, although there's ways around that because the Brinno cameras have their own screens, which I will get into in a second here. But really, I found after using it, it didn't really need the screen, because once you connect it to your phone, I have an iPhone 8, so I don't have a very big iPhone, but some of the new smartphones have much bigger screens. So when you're looking at the screen on your phone, or even an iPad or a tablet or something like that, you can see very easily what your camera is pointing at in high resolution. And it makes it focusing very, very easy to do. And that's what I was getting at with these screens here on the Brinno cameras. This original Brinno camera, this TLC 200 Pro, this screen is not HD by any means, and it is also very, very small. I found it very, very difficult to focus this camera. And when you're doing a time lapse, especially when it's for a purpose, like things like YouTube, where you're trying to maybe make money off of it, or you're just an artist, focus comes into play quite heavily. If you don't have focus, you really don't have a whole lot. So I found it very difficult to focus this camera. There is a zoom feature for the screen so you can get in closer so you can get an expanded view of what you're looking at. But because the screen is so small and because the lens that's on here, which I'll talk more about that in a little bit, focusing is very, very touchy. It's very difficult to focus this camera, both because of the screen size and because of how sensitive the focus ring is for the lens. This here is an aftermarket lens, but the TLC 2000, this is just the kit lens that comes with it, the default lens, if you want to call it that. The focus ring or the lens system on here for the Atlie EON Time-Lapse camera, it focuses very nicely. And there's two things about that. One is that there's a lot of travel on this focus ring. So when you turn the focus ring, the lens ring, when you turn it, there's a lot of travel, which means that when it's going in and out of focus, it takes a lot of turns to do it. So it helps it be more precise, and you don't got to fiddle with it as much. So when you're turning it, if you turn it just a little bit too much, it really doesn't make a lot of difference. You have to turn it more and more and more to change the focus, which I really prefer for a lot of lenses, unless you're trying to do video work, which is like where you need those fast focus things. But for a camera like this, it makes it really nice to try to focus it. The TLC 2000, or I'm sorry, TLC 200 Pro, this is these are just C-mount lenses, and you can use aftermarket lenses for both of these cameras, the TLC 2000 and the TLC 200 Pro. They're just C-mount lenses, and you can pretty much put any lens on there that you want. That's kind of nice because the kit lens, the lens that it comes with, just like the Atlie EON Time-Lapse camera, is just a prime lens. There is no zoom feature on it whatsoever. So in order to change the field of view, you got to move the camera. It's not really that big of a deal unless you're in a particular situation where space is an issue. I found that using a zoom lens has been helpful in a few cases where if I want to get really, really close to something, and you can't really do that so much if you're trying to just focus on one part of a plant, something like that. You can't do that with a fixed lens like this and the lens that the Atlie EON Time-Lapse camera has. So that's kind of a long-winded version of saying that the TLC or the Brinno brand of cameras, you can put your own lens on it and get any kind of lens you want as long as it's a C-mount lens. So the lenses are interchangeable. So with the Atlie EON Time-Lapse camera, you don't have that option. Although it's not really that big of a negative. I think the biggest negative in certain circumstances is just the fact that you don't have a screen on the back of the camera for the Atlie EON Time-Lapse camera. Having the screen on the back of the camera for the Brinno cameras without having to connect it to any Wi-Fi signals or anything like that, you could pretty much just take this outside, put it in a housing, which I'll talk about that in a second, which is right there. Put it in something to protect it and just set it up and leave it and go. And that leads me into talking about the battery life. That's another kind of a gray area when it comes to comparing these two things because it depends on what you're doing with the camera. Before I get into talking about the batteries, they call this the construction housing. Brinno makes this. This is a housing for either one of those two cameras, the Brinno cameras, and it comes with the this mount bracket. And you can pretty much put this in any position that you want, and it mounts to pretty much anything as long as it fits in the clamp. If it doesn't fit in the clamp, I guess you could use a strap and do it that way. But anyways, the housing itself, this is kind of what I was talking about with the battery life and everything. The housing itself came with a battery pack which uses 16 AA batteries, and it's supposed to last for a year, just continuously without having to do anything with it. I found that the Brinno battery packs, I went through 3 of them, and they all did the same thing. It drains the batteries by itself. In a matter of, I think, a month, it drained all 16 batteries completely. And I thought maybe it has something to do with the camera, which it didn't. So I actually did months and months and months of testing, leaving like the batteries in the refrigerator, in the housing, in the battery pack itself, without being connected to anything, and the batteries drained by themselves. There was something to do with the electronics for the battery pack that comes with this construction housing with the Brinno camera, that it just drains the batteries by itself, and it beats the whole purpose of using a battery pack. And going through 16 AA batteries just for testing purposes, it gets kind of expensive. And then you end up having to throw them away, and they're completely useless just because you're trying to test something out without even using it with the camera. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and set the construction housing aside and not talk about the battery pack anymore. We'll just put that down there on the floor. So the two Brinno cameras here, the TLC 200 Pro and the TLC 2000, they last quite a long time on batteries. So I'm going to go ahead and put up on the screen here the times that you get for each one of these cameras running on a battery. And this is what I was getting into before I went off on a little tangent there. Sorry about that. The Atli EON Time-Lapse camera does not last very long if you leave it set up to run, even on eco mode. It does not last very long at all if you're just setting it up for to record something like plants growing. You pretty much want to have this thing plugged into power if you're going to do that. If you're just recording some seed sprouting and something that's going to last a couple of days, this will work. But on a battery that's rechargeable and being a lithium battery that's rechargeable, it just continuously drains the battery without really doing anything else, just because it has to be on. The Brinno cameras here, these are pretty amazing on what they can do. Mainly, I'm not going to talk about the TLC 2000 because this only has 2 AA batteries. It's going to be a little bit different. The one that I've used quite often in the past was the TLC 200 Pro, and the batteries in this thing, because there's 4 AA's, it would last for about 35, 40 days. I think if I had it set at 10-minute intervals, or maybe it was 20 minutes, something like that. To just let that sit for that long of a period of time, just let it do its thing without having to do anything else. It's pretty nice. It makes it very convenient. But that's kind of where the positives stop with these cameras. The Brinno cameras, they actually, the sensor in there, it must be a really cheap sensor because I don't really find that the image quality is all that great. Now, back when these cameras first came out, as I've said before, these were Brinno was the only one in the world that had a dedicated time-lapse camera that can do what it did. It made things so much easier to do with time-lapses. The fact that you just set it up, and once it's done, it creates a video on its own, and you have a video file of a time-lapse. You don't got to do any editing or anything like that. These here were really, really nice to use, and the image quality itself wasn't really that big of a deal, the fact that it wasn't very great. I was kind of waiting for the version to come out that was a 1080p version because I figured that the image quality would improve, increasing the resolution. But it made it a little bit sharper, but the image quality itself I found to be about the same as the TLC 200 Pro. So those two cameras there, they don't really have, I wouldn't call it excellent image quality. It has okay image quality. And it has the screens on the back, and the TLC 2000 is a slightly larger screen than the TLC 200 Pro. So both of those cameras there have done what they needed to do for what I wanted to use them for in the past, and I've sort of enjoyed using them. But today, years later, Atli EON has made a time-lapse camera that I feel is a big improvement over these Brinno cameras. Now, these have their time and their place, and they certainly are not bad by any means. It's going to be circumstantial depending on what you do with a time-lapse camera. But the Atli EON has so many more features compared to those cameras, and it increases its versatility. The fact that I can just set this camera up to record with the app, I can see it on my screen, I can see in high resolution what the image looks like, I can focus really easy with it, I can set it up to whatever interval I want, it can upgrade firmware really easily. There's a lot of things about this camera, even though it doesn't have a screen on it, which I think using the phone is better anyways. And even though the battery doesn't last very long, and really I feel more comfortable having it plugged into power anyways, just to make sure it continuously records without having to change the batteries or check the batteries or anything like that. Because even if it loses power, the Atlie EON camera will still continue to do what it needs to do for a few days until the power came back on. In most cases, anyone who has power outages isn't going to last that long anyways. So really, if you have this plugged into power, if you're using it inside of your house, that's going to be the best option anyways. So also, just the fact that it's a rechargeable battery, that you don't got to worry about replacing batteries. I went through a lot of AA batteries using the Brinno cameras. So there's some pros and cons, and I think mostly I was kind of skeptical at first, to be honest. I didn't think that these Atlie EON cameras were going to be all that great, just because it didn't have a screen on it, and just because the battery life and everything. But once I used it and actually kind of understood how things worked and how much nicer it was to use with an app, you can do a lot with the app. I really found the Atli EON Time-Lapse camera to be a big improvement over the Brinno cameras. If you are interested in the Atli EON Time-Lapse camera, there will be a link in the video description below. It's not a link where you click on it and I make any money off of it. It's just a link to the website. That's it. I didn't want to get into too many specs on any of these cameras here in this video. You can look those up yourself. This was basically just an overview and just kind of compare and contrast these cameras with my experience and just kind of give my opinion on it. So I hope that was helpful. I've done a lot of takes with this video. I spent a couple hours just trying to figure out what I wanted to say exactly. So the fact that I got through this take all at once without having to redo anything was kind of refreshing finally. So I hope that helped you out and hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.